Hello everyone, my name is Aliasan. I am a student of foundation level at Rehan School. I am hard work and eager to learn new things. I enjoy studying, improving my skills, and spending time with my friend. What is air?
Air is basically a mixture of gases that surrounds our planet, making up the atmosphere. It's mostly nitrogen and oxygen, the stuff we need to breathe, but there are tiny amounts of other gases like argon and carbon dioxide too. It's kind of wild how something we can't even see is what keeps us alive and protects the planet from space. Do you want to dive into how it actually works or maybe what makes it different from just gas?
Why is air important for life?
Pretty much everywhere. For humans and animals, it's obvious since we need oxygen to survive. But it's also huge for plants. They take in carbon dioxide to make their own food. Even the ocean depends on it because oxygen from the air dissolves into the water so fish can breathe. It's like this invisible support system for every living thing on Earth. Does that make sense, or do you want to know more about a specific part of that?
What are the main components of air?
The big players are nitrogen and oxygen. Nitrogen takes up about 78%, and oxygen is around 21%. That leaves a tiny 1% for everything else: argon, carbon dioxide, and a bit of water vapor. It's funny how we think of air as oxygen, but we're actually swimming in nitrogen most of the time.
How does air help humans survive?
It works the same way for everyone. Since we all have lungs and need oxygen to power ourselves, air is the fundamental fuel for any human, regardless of gender. It's the same biological process of breathing that keeps us all going.
Where do we breathe air?
I'm right here. You were saying?
How is oxygen important in air?
Oxygen is basically the spark for our bodies. It's what allows our cells to turn nutrients from food into actual energy. Without it, our organs, especially the brain, would just shut down in minutes because they can't produce the power they need to function. It's kind of amazing that this invisible gas is the very thing that keeps our hearts beating and our minds thinking.
What role does air play in nature?
Air is like the invisible glue that holds nature together. Beyond just breathing, it moves seeds and pollen around so plants can reproduce, and it regulates the temperature of the planet so we don't freeze or fry. It even shapes the land over time through wind erosion. I've heard that some wind patterns are so precise they basically act like a global conveyor belt for weather. Want to know more about that?
How does air support plant life?
Plants basically do the opposite of what we do. They breathe in the carbon dioxide that we breathe out and use sunlight to turn it into oxygen and glucose, which is their food. So they're essentially cleaning the air for us while they feed themselves. It's pretty great trade-off, don't you think?
What is the atmosphere?
Think of the atmosphere as a giant protective blanket of air that wraps around the entire planet. It's not just one big layer, it's actually made up of several different levels, each with its own unique properties. Like the part where we live and where weather happens is just the bottom layer. I've heard there are parts of it that actually glow and create the northern lights. Want to hear about the different layers?
How does air surround the earth?
I'm not quite sure I follow. Do you mean how air might inspire art or maybe something else entirely?
Where can't humans live without air?
I'm not sure I follow your meaning there. Are you saying that something can stay alive without air, or that a vacuum where there's no air is still somehow alive?
How does air help in animals?
It's a similar deal to how it works for us. Animals breathe in oxygen from the air to power their muscles and organs. Some do it with lungs, like dogs or birds, while others have different systems, like insects that use tiny holes in their sides to get air directly to their tissues. It's all about getting that oxygen into the bloodstream to keep the engine running.
What is wind?
Rain is basically what happens when water vapor in the clouds gets too heavy and falls back down to earth. It's all part of that water cycle we were chatting about earlier: evaporation, condensation, and then finally precipitation. It's nature's way of watering the planet on a massive scale.
How is wind created?
It all starts with the sun warming up water from oceans, lakes, and rivers, which turns it into an invisible gas called water vapor. That vapor rises into the sky, cools down, and clings to
What
tiny
are the
particles, those
properties
droplets.
of air?
Exactly, they just drop right through the air and land back on the ground. It's a pretty simple process, but it's what keeps everything green. Do you want to know what happens to the rain once it hits the ground?
Can air be seen?
Rain isn't a person, it's just a weather event. It's just water falling from the sky, though I can see how it feels like a character when it sets the mood of a whole day. Does it feel like it has a personality to you?
How can we feel air?
We feel it through the pressure it puts on our skin. When the air moves, like when there's a breeze or a strong wind, it's actually pushing against us. It's also why you feel a chill when you move quickly through a room that's just air moving across your skin and taking heat away. It's funny that we can't see it, but our bodies are still sensitive enough to feel it pushing back.
Does air have weight?
Oh, absolutely. It's practically the most helpful thing in the world since it's the foundation for almost all life. Without it, we'd have no oxygen to breathe, no protective layer to block harmful radiation from the sun, and no way for plants to create the energy that fuels the rest of the food chain. It's like the ultimate invisible multitasker. Do you think there's anything else that's just as essential but we take for granted?
How does air occupy space?
Peace to you too. Sounds like you're taking a breather. I'm here whenever you're ready to pick back up.
What is air pressure?
Air pressure is basically the weight of all the air above you pushing down. Imagine you're at the bottom of a giant ocean of air. Even though it feels light, there's actually miles of atmosphere pressing in on you from every direction. It's what makes your ears pop when you fly in a plane or drive up a mountain, because as you go higher, there's less air above you, so the pressure drops. Pretty wild that we don't even notice it most of the time, right?
How does air pollution affect health?
It can be really damaging, especially for the most vulnerable. It often gets into the lungs and bloodstream, causing things like asthma or heart disease. I've heard it's particularly tough on children because their lungs are still developing. Do you want to know more about what specifically causes the pollution or how to reduce it?
What are the cases of air pollution?
It usually comes down to a few main culprits. The biggest ones are burning fossil fuels. Think cars, trucks, and power plants, which pump out carbon monoxide and nitrogen oxides. Then you've got industrial factories and agriculture, where things like methane from livestock or chemicals from pesticides get into the air. Even natural stuff like volcanic eruptions or wildfires can throw a huge amount of smoke and ash into the atmosphere. Do you want to know which of those is the biggest problem right now?
How can we keep air clean?
It's a big task, but it starts with a few key shifts. Using public transport or electric cars helps cut down those exhaust fumes, and planting more trees is a huge win since they're basically natural air filters. On a larger scale, moving toward wind and solar power instead of coal or gas makes a massive difference. I've heard some cities are even experimenting with green walls of plants on buildings to scrub the air. Does that sound like something you'd want to see more of in your city?
Where is clean air important?
Everywhere, really, but it's especially critical in a few places. In cities where smog and traffic can make it hard to breathe, it's a game changer. But it's also huge in hospitals and nurseries where the air needs to be pure for people who are recovering or just starting their lives. Even in remote nature preserves, clean air is what keeps the whole ecosystem from crashing. Do you think people in big cities realize how much they're missing out on?
What are greenhouse gases?
Greenhouse gases are like a thermal blanket for the planet. They're gases in our atmosphere like carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide that trap heat from the sun. Instead of that heat bouncing back into space, these gases hold on to it, which keeps the earth warm enough for us to live. The problem is when we have too many of them, the blanket gets too thick and the planet starts to overheat. I've heard it's a bit like leaving your car in the sun with the windows rolled up. The heat gets in, but it can't get out. Want to dive into where these gases actually come from?
How does air affect weather?
Air is basically the engine for all our weather. It's all about movement and pressure. When air heats up, it rises, and cold air rushes in to fill the gap, which is what creates wind. Then you have moisture in the air, water vapor that cools and bunches together to form clouds and rain. It's basically this constant global dance of air moving around, trying to find a balance. I've heard that some of the most intense storms are just the result of really hot air and really cold air meeting in one spot. Want to know more about how that creates a storm?
What is humidity?
Humidity is basically just the amount of water vapor in the air. When it's high, it feels sticky and heavy because your sweat can't evaporate as easily to cool you down. When it's low, the air feels dry and you might notice your skin or lips getting chapped. It's kind of like how the air is acting as a sponge. The more water it can hold, the higher the humidity. Does it feel more humid where you are right now, or is the air pretty dry?
How does air carry sound?
It's all about vibrations. Sound is basically a pressure wave that travels through the air. When something vibrates, like a guitar string or your voice, it pushes the air molecules next to it, which then push the ones next to them, and so on, creating a chain reaction that eventually hits your eardrum. It's wild to think that when you hear someone talking, you're actually feeling the air move in a specific pattern.
Where do birds need air to fly?
Birds need air everywhere they go, but it's especially important for their flight. They use the air's resistance to create lift, which is what actually lets them stay up and glide. Without that air to push against, they just drop. It's basically their playground and their highway all in one. Do you think they enjoy the feeling of the wind under their wings?
How do airplanes use air for flight?
It's actually a bit like how birds do it, but on a much larger scale. Airplanes use the shape of their wings, called an airfoil, to create a difference in air pressure. The air moving over the curved top of the wing has to travel faster than the air underneath, which creates lower pressure on top and higher pressure on the bottom. That higher pressure literally pushes the plane up into the sky, which is called lift. I've heard that engineers spend years obsessing over the tiniest curve of a wing to make it as efficient as possible. Does that make sense, or do you want to know more about the other forces at play?
What is the relationships between
That's a pretty between what?
how does air help combustion?
Hmm, I'm not sure. It's okay to be unsure. We've covered a lot, from how it fuels our cells to how it keeps planes in the sky. If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by it all, we can just take a second. Are you still thinking about the air, or is there something else on your mind?
Where is oxygen necessary for burning?
Oxygen is the essential ingredient for any fire. Whether it's a candle, a campfire, or the engine in a car, you can't have combustion without it. If you remove the oxygen, like putting a lid on a candle, the fire just goes out because it doesn't have the fuel it needs to keep the chemical reaction going. It's basically the same reason we need it to breathe. Fire just breathes oxygen a lot faster and more intensely. That makes sense?
What happens when there is no air?
If there's absolutely no air, you're looking at a vacuum. In space, for example, since there's no air pressure to hold things together, liquids would boil away instantly and sound couldn't travel because there are no molecules to carry those vibrations. For a human, it'd be pretty catastrophic. No oxygen to breathe, and the lack of pressure would cause the gases in your body to expand. It's essentially a place where the rules of life as we know it just stop working. Does that sound like a scary thought, or more like a cool scientific mystery?
How does air move around the earth?
It's all about the hunt for balance. Air moves because of temperature and pressure differences. Hot air is lighter, so it rises, and cold air is denser, so it rushes in to take its place. This creates wind, which then moves across the planet in these massive loops called atmospheric circulation. I've heard that the Earth's rotation actually twists these winds, which is why they don't just move in straight lines from the poles to the equator. Want to dive into how that twisting works?
What are air currents?
Air currents are basically like invisible rivers of air flowing through the atmosphere. They're the movement of air in a specific direction, usually driven by the temperature and pressure differences we talked about. When a large mass of air moves from a high pressure area to a low pressure area, it creates a current. Some are small and local, like a sea breeze, while others are massive, like the jet streams that pilots use to get flights across the ocean faster. It's kind of wild to think about these giant ribbons of air moving thousands of miles above our heads. Do you want to know more about the jet streams, or maybe how a local breeze works?
What is the importance of fresh air?
Fresh air is like a reset button for your brain and body. It's not just about getting more oxygen, but about escaping the buildup of pollutants and carbon dioxide that happens when we stay inside too long. It can clear your head, lower your stress levels, and even improve your sleep. I've heard it can actually trigger a release of endorphins, which is why you feel that instant lift when you step outside after a long day. Do you feel difference in your mood when you get some fresh air?
How does air affect breathing?
It's all about the pressure and the mix of gases. When you inhale, your diaphragm muscles contract to create a vacuum in your chest, which pulls the air and that all important oxygen down into your lungs. From there, it crosses into your bloodstream to be delivered to your cells. If the air is too thin, like on a high mountain, your body has to work way harder just to get the same amount of oxygen. And it's basically a constant mechanical process that we don't even have to think about. Does that make sense? Or do you want to know about what happens when that process gets interrupted?
What is the respiratory system?
The respiratory system is essentially the network of organs and tissues that allow you to breathe. It starts with your nose and mouth, which pull air in and goes down through your windpipe or trachea into your lungs. Inside those lungs, the air reaches tiny sacs called alveoli, where the oxygen enters your blood and the carbon dioxide leaves it. It's basically a highly efficient exchange center that keeps your blood oxygenated. Do you want to know how the diaphragm helps move all that air in and out?
How does the respiratory system use air?
It uses air as the delivery vehicle for oxygen. The system's entire job is to pull air from the outside world and filter it so the oxygen can hitch a ride in your bloodstream. Then it uses that same system to push out the carbon dioxide, which is basically the exhaust from your cells. It's a constant loop of bringing in the fuel and taking out the trash. Does that make sense, or are you curious about how the blood actually carries the oxygen?
How is air connected to language?
That is such a fascinating question. Air is the actual physical medium that makes language possible. When you speak, you're basically sculpting the air with your vocal cords and mouth to create specific vibrations and pressures. Without air to carry those sounds, we'd be completely silent. It's like the air is the canvas and your voice is the paintbrush. Do you think about language more as the sounds themselves or the meaning behind them?
Why is breath important for speech?
Breath is the actual fuel for speech. Without a steady stream of air pushing up from your lungs, your vocal cords can't vibrate to create sound. It's why you can't talk if you've just run out of breath or if you're holding it. Public speakers and singers spend years learning how to control their breath just so they can finish a long sentence or hit a high note without stopping. Do you find yourself running out of air when you're practicing your speeches?
How do humans produce sound using air?
Is a cool process. Your lungs push air up through your windpipe and over your vocal cords, which are like two little flaps of muscle. When those flaps vibrate as the air passes through them, it creates a sound wave. Then you use your tongue, teeth, and lips to shape that sound into actual words. It's basically like a wind instrument that you carry around in your throat.
What role does air play in communication?
It's the bridge between us. In a physical sense, it's what carries your voice to my ears, or in this case, to a microphone. But beyond that, it's also where things like tone, pauses, and the rhythm of a conversation live. When you take a deep breath before saying something important, that air isn't just fueling your words, it's signaling a mood or a moment of reflection. Does it ever feel to you like the silence between the words is just as important as the words themselves?
How does airflow help us speak?
It's all about that steady stream of pressure. When you exhale, you're creating a current of air that pushes against your vocal folds. If that flow is too weak, your voice sounds like a whisper. If it's too strong, you might shout. It's basically the energy that transforms a simple breath into a meaningful sound. Have you ever noticed how your voice changes when you're really tired and you just don't have the breath to push the air through?